The Leper King, the tragedy of Baldwin IV. Imagine a king, born in palaces, raised among nobles, yet never able to truly feel a single touch. When he held a sword, he didn't sense the cold weight of metal at his fingertips, but the emptiness left by a merciless disease. He ascended the throne at the age of 12. His youth was not marked by triumphs, but by a relentless race against death. Beneath the golden domes of Jerusalem, on one side burned the sacred fire of the Crusaders, on the other, the growing shadow of Saladin. And in the middle stood a young king, his skin slowly decaying. Those who saw him on the battlefield believed they were witnessing a legend. His face was wrapped in bandages. Though his hands could no longer grip a sword, his mind remained consumed by strategies of war. For he was not merely a soldier, he was a symbol of resistance, of faith, and of inevitable decline. As the disease failed to conquer his spirit, he continued to rule his kingdom. He mastered diplomacy, understood his enemies, chose his allies, and above all, he knew that time was a clock ticking against him. Each day he lived with a little less feeling and a little more understanding. This is not the story of a forgotten king. This is the epic and tragic tale of Baldwin IV, the Leper King who held a kingdom together, even as his body fell apart. Historical background. In the shadow of the Kingdom of Jerusalem, this is Jerusalem, the heart of three great religions, a city that, for thousands of years, has been the capital not of peace, but of war. Temples built over palaces, palaces built over blood. It is the middle of the 12th century. While kings are being crowned in Europe, the echoes of the Crusades still thunder across the Middle East. In 1099, Jerusalem had been seized by Christian armies arriving from Europe. The city was bathed in blood. Mosques were turned into churches. Homes became fortresses. Thus, the Kingdom of Jerusalem was born a Christian state carved by the sword on foreign land. But this kingdom was never truly safe. It was surrounded by enemies, the Zengids in Syria, the Fatimids in Egypt, and within its borders, a Muslim and Arab population that still endured. And in the midst of this siege, the kingdom was also being torn apart by palace intrigue. Kings died young, and civil strife often erupted before their successors could even claim the throne. Once more, the balance of power was shifting. The Muslim world was beginning to unite under a single leader, Saladin. He conquered Egypt first, then Syria, and then he began to rally the entire Islamic world to reclaim Jerusalem. Time was running out for the Crusaders, and at that very moment, an unlikely figure ascended the throne of Jerusalem. Not a conqueror, not a religious icon, just a child, but not an ordinary child. Baldwin IV, a prince who had been stricken with leprosy at an early age and whose survival was never even expected. The enemy was closing in from outside. Betrayal was spreading from within. And Jerusalem became a chessboard in a game no one knew how to win. A game of faith, ambition, and death. And on that board, the one piece that seemed weakest would soon make the strongest moves. Baldwin's childhood and his battle with leprosy. Some kings are born with a sword, others with a crown. Baldwin was born into pain, and that pain would become his most loyal companion. Baldwin IV was born in Jerusalem in the year 1161. His father was King Amalric I, and his mother, Agnes of Courtenay, was of noble Byzantine lineage. As the heir to the Kingdom of Jerusalem, Baldwin was raised from a young age with strict religious discipline and a high-quality education. His tutor was none other than William of Tyre, a renowned historian and theologian of the time. William quickly recognized Baldwin's intelligence and sharp political mind. But he also noticed something far more troubling. Baldwin could not feel pain. By the age of 9, even when he fell while playing with friends, he didn't cry. He would bleed, but feel nothing. He was unresponsive to touch. In the medieval world, this could mean only one thing: leprosy. When the diagnosis was confirmed, Baldwin's fate was sealed. Leprosy was not just a disease that rotted flesh, it was seen as a divine curse. It isolated people from society, from their families, and even from God. Lepers were banished to the outskirts of cities. Their faces were to be covered. They were forced to carry bells so others could hear misfortune coming. But for Baldwin, this illness was not the end. It was the beginning of his resistance. As a child, he learned to make peace with death. He watched his reflection change day by day, yet his will only grew stronger. William of Tyre wrote that Baldwin felt no pain, but responded quickly to insult. The disease didn't break him, it forged him. Calm, resolute, calculated, and above all, fearless. By the time he turned 12, his father had died, and the throne of Jerusalem stood empty. Many nobles, fearing his illness, suggested another heir be chosen. But Baldwin had a presence that silenced those who dared to doubt him. He was no longer just a sickly boy. He was the king tested by God. And so it began. As leprosy ate away at his body, he would strive to hold his kingdom together, fighting not only the decay within himself, but also stepping onto the grand stage of history as one of the most extraordinary leaders the medieval world would ever know. Surprising rise, ascending the throne at 12. Imagine a king who, barely a child, is forced to wear the crown in a world ruled by swords, where every shadow hides a dagger. Baldwin IV ascended the throne of Jerusalem at just 12 years old. Following the death of his father, King Amalric I, a kingdom already shaken by wars and intrigues, was suddenly burdened on the shoulders of a young boy. This boy was battling leprosy, a disease slowly consuming his body. There was widespread doubt about the young king's ability to rule. His leprosy set him apart, marking him as a symbol of weakness. But in a harsh land like Jerusalem, strength was everything. Nobles quietly pushed for the throne to pass to a healthier heir. Yet Baldwin's unbreakable will silenced their doubts. Despite his fragile body, Baldwin carried the weight of the kingdom. He was more than just a symbol. He was a true leader, determined to keep his realm standing amidst storms of war and betrayal. His early years on the throne were a constant struggle to prove himself, both to rival factions within the court and to external enemies. The kingdom of Jerusalem was surrounded by danger. Outside its walls, Saladin, the new and powerful leader of the Muslim world, was uniting forces to reclaim Jerusalem. Inside, political rivalries brewed, threatening to shake the very throne itself. Baldwin's youth was both a weakness and a strength. Many underestimated him because of his age. But this underestimation gave him the advantage to develop clever strategies and surprise his opponents. Guided by his mother Agnes and the experienced noble Raymond of Tripoli, he quickly mastered the intricacies of diplomacy and politics. Even as his health rapidly declined, Baldwin never abandoned military leadership. He rode into battle, earning respect with his courage and strategic mind. His illness weakened his body, but never extinguished his spirit or his determination to rule. His coronation was more than a ceremony. It was a powerful declaration that the Kingdom of Jerusalem still stood strong, led by a young king whose resolve could not be shaken. Thus began a reign woven with courage and resistance, one of history's most unforgettable and tragic stories of leadership. The great rivalry with Saladin. In one of the darkest and most complex periods of the Middle Ages, a battle was raging between the Kingdom of Jerusalem and the Muslim world, not just over land, but over faiths and destinies. The most striking and dramatic rivalry of this era unfolded between the young and ill King Baldwin IV and the powerful and ambitious leader, Saladin. Saladin was not only a military commander, but also a political genius. By uniting Egypt and Syria, he created a major power center in the Islamic world. His greatest goal was to reclaim the Holy Lands for the Muslims, especially Jerusalem, from the Crusaders. To achieve this, he skillfully employed both diplomacy and warfare tactics. On the other hand, Baldwin IV, despite his physical hardships, became a symbol of resistance. His body was weakened by leprosy, but his intellect, determination, and courage grew stronger every day. The duty to protect Jerusalem against Saladin's rise rested entirely on his shoulders. The rivalry between these two leaders was not only fought on the battlefield, it was also a sharp contest of intelligence and strategy. While Saladin expanded his armies, Baldwin focused on diplomacy and alliances. Though they often appeared as enemies, mutual respect and admiration shaped this competition. Saladin launched multiple campaigns to besiege Jerusalem, but Baldwin bravely organized the resistance each time. In the Battle of Alarcos in 1182, despite his worsening illness, Baldwin personally commanded and succeeded in pushing back Saladin's forces. This victory was the clearest proof of his strength and willpower. However, time was working against Baldwin. As his illness progressed, internal intrigues within the kingdom and external threats grew. Saladin patiently and resolutely awaited his opportunity. The Battle of Hattin in 1187 marked the turning point of this rivalry. Saladin dealt a crushing defeat to the Crusader army, and the gates of Jerusalem were soon to be open to him. Behind this great rivalry lay not only two leaders, but two civilizations, two worlds of faith, and two distinct philosophies of life. Baldwin's tragedy and Saladin's rise compose some of the most dramatic pages in medieval history. Regardless of the outcome, the names of these two figures can never be thought of separately in history. Their encounter is not only a story of wars, but also an epic tale of human will, faith, and the power of leadership. Palace intrigues and the progression of leprosy. In the dark corridors of the Middle Ages, throne games and palace intrigues were often deadlier than external enemies. The life of Baldwin IV, the young king of the Kingdom of Jerusalem, was spent right in the midst of this chaos and danger. He had to fight not only the leprosy that afflicted his body, but also betrayals and power struggles within his own kingdom. Baldwin's leprosy gradually progressed and took over his body. The decay that began in his hands and feet, the wounds hidden beneath the bandages on his face, and the increasing pain all tested the king's physical limits. Medieval medicine was helpless against this disease. Leprosy was not only contagious, but also carried a severe social stigma. Even within the palace, there was a distance maintained around him. Counselors, nobles, and even his own family treated him cautiously because of his illness. This situation deepened Baldwin's loneliness and affected him psychologically as well. His physical weakness became an opportunity for some powerful nobles at court. Baldwin's illness was an ideal leverage for schemers and rivals who sought to strengthen their claims to the throne. A silent but ruthless power struggle was unfolding within the palace. Some nobles believed the kingdom was weakening and planned to place themselves or their allies on the throne. These conflicts were influenced not only by family rivalries, but also by political alliances and external powers. Especially among Baldwin's relatives and high nobles, there were major disagreements about governance and policies. Some favored a more aggressive foreign policy, while others supported peace and diplomacy. These differences planted the seeds of hidden enmities and betrayals within the court. Although Baldwin was weakened, His intelligence and sharp instincts made him aware of these intrigues, and he tried to maintain control. However, as the disease progressed, this control gradually diminished. The palace intrigues affected not only politics, but also Baldwin's private life deeply. Even among his loyal counselors and guards, trust issues arose. The pain and hardships brought by the illness caused divisions within the royal family itself. Baldwin's early death seemed inevitable, which brought even greater uncertainty about the future of the throne. Baldwin's struggle with leprosy was not just the collapse of his body, but also the testing of a kingdom and its leadership. The palace intrigues rose in the shadow of power centers, trying to exploit his physical weakness. Yet despite the challenges, Baldwin never lost his will. He resisted the dark games of the court and, despite his ailing body, tried to govern his kingdom as best as possible. In conclusion, the life and reign of Baldwin IV is not merely a story of battling a disease, but also an epic struggle to survive amid palace intrigues and political storms. This tragic king fought against both his body and the dark games surrounding him, securing his place in history as one of the most unforgettable figures of the Middle Ages. Decline and death. The life of Baldwin IV went down in history as one of the most dramatic and tragic reigns of the Middle Ages. Ascending the throne at a young age, this king struggled both with leprosy and the internal and external threats facing the Kingdom of Jerusalem. His final years tell a painful story of a slow but inevitable decline. Leprosy gradually continued to consume Baldwin's body day by day. The wounds and deformities, initially hidden beneath the bandages on his face, eventually rendered his hands and feet completely useless. The king could no longer hold a sword or mount his horse. His eyes grew weary not only from the physical destruction caused by the disease, but also from the heavy burdens he bore regarding the throne and the future of his kingdom. His physical weakness slowly diminished his power and governance. Court intrigues and power struggles intensified during this process. Baldwin found it increasingly difficult to maintain the balance of power. His deteriorating health emboldened those who opposed him. Yet, through all this turmoil, he never lost his willpower or his qualities as a leader. His mind remained sharp, and his strategies were still impressive, but his body's limits tightened with each passing day. His last great test came at the Battle of Hattin in 1187. Against the army of Saladin, the Crusader forces suffered a devastating defeat. This loss marked a turning point for the Kingdom of Jerusalem and sounded the final bells of Baldwin's reign. The king found himself in an increasingly dark period, both due to his own health and the future of his kingdom. Aware that his death was approaching, Baldwin made his final arrangements for the succession. He worked to secure the safety of his heirs and the protection of the kingdom. However, the absence of a strong and determined leader like him only increased the vulnerability of the Kingdom of Jerusalem and strengthened its enemies. In his final days, the king was bedridden. Everyone around him awaited his death, but Baldwin remained spiritually steadfast. His courage and acceptance in the face of death were recorded by contemporary historians as a great example of bravery. In 1185, at the young age of only 24, he passed away. His brief but impactful reign remained one of the most tragic and unforgettable stories of the Middle Ages. Baldwin IV's death was not just the loss of a king. It was the herald of a period in which the Kingdom of Jerusalem gradually began to collapse. The legacy he left behind was one of determination, courage, and leadership despite leprosy. This legacy ensured that he would be remembered throughout history as the Leper King. And so, the tragedy that began in youth ended with a heavy decline. Baldwin IV shone like a star on the dark stage of the Middle Ages and quietly faded away, leaving behind a legend etched into history.